Hey guys, and welcome back to Group Therapy. I'm one of your hosts, licensed clinical social worker, Kristen Gingrich.
And I'm licensed psychologist, Dr. Kristen Casey.
I'm licensed psychologist, Dr. Jessica Rabon.
And I'm licensed psychologist, Dr. J.
This week, we are talking all about mental health and therapy in movies and TV, which we all know there's the good, the bad, the ugly, and the really, really bad. So settle in, take a seat, and welcome to Group Therapy. Last week, we talked all about the really hard but really important topic about suicide. I really hope everybody who listened really enjoyed the episode and took something away from it. I don't know if you guys agree, I felt like it was a really good balance of transparency and being talking about it really healthily and just putting those things out there that sometimes are really, really hard to talk about in a safe manner.
Mm-hmm.
But we did leave you guys with a reflection question, and that reflection question was, what are some things in your life worth living for? And there were some amazing responses, so I'm going to go through a couple of them. Someone said summer bonfires. We love a good bonfire. Guys, I'm going to share it for the people who are, I can't see the thing. I'm going to share that someone shared a photo of a cow.
Oh, my heart. Oh my God.
I love it.
So cute.
Someone said, my kids, my parents, my family, being outside. Someone said, my niece and her big smile when she runs to give me a hug. Someone did say deep dish pizza. I do love me some deep dish pizza.
It's just good. Yeah.
No?
Not a fan personally, but...
Really?
I mean, pizza's pizza. I love pizza.
Sure.
This will be right up Justin's alley, Kristen's alley. Plants. They're plants.
Oh, I got one right.
Garlic cheese bread
and
a hot chai latte.
Oh, a hot chai latte sounds amazing right now.
I do love a chai.
Halloween and all things fall. The smell of fresh
Except
flower.
candy corn. Except
candy corn. Fuck that shit.
Wow.
You guys are coming in hot tonight. Jeez.
Super hot.
And then a couple people did say the Welcome to Group Therapy podcast.
Let's go.
Let's
do it.
But as always, thank you guys for your responses. But this week we are talking all about mental health and therapy in media and movies. So first question off the bat is, what is your favorite movie that shows mental health or therapy? Mine is Inside Out. Love me some Inside Out.
That's a really good one.
Mm-hmm.
I love Silver Linings Playbook. It's one of my favorite. I think I've shown this on the podcast. My water bottle has a quote from it. Can't read it because it's silver, but it's funny. It's there.
I love it. If I had to really think, A Beautiful Mind is one of my favorite movies. I do have some issues with it, but I really, really enjoy the plot and all that stuff.
It does feel like there's almost nothing that exists without some issues, but
absolutely.
Mine is the same way. Mine's Good Will Hunting. It's got more than a few issues though.
Yeah.
I personally feel like there's just no way, because if you show, for example, Silver Linings Playbook, and you show, as we'll dive into it, right, a side of bipolar, there's going to be a group of people who say that is misrepresentation of bipolar because it's not their experience. Now, there are very clear, things that are very misrepresented or stereotyped for sure. But I always find that sometimes too, when I watch movies, I always have to also take a step back and say, is this also different from maybe what my experience might be too?
Yeah. And then I think the people who are creating and producing movies, we can't really fault them either, right? Because they're not therapists. Maybe they are, who knows, or maybe they talk with other therapists. But I do think not everybody knows what goes on inside the therapy room either, unless you're a therapist or a client or you're involved in mental health. So I even think, to produce a film and put all that out there, there's so many nuances just in each therapy session. And Kristen, just like you said too, everybody takes these things differently.
Yeah, it kind of makes me feel like it depends on the movie or show you're watching. Because just like we watch other things that you're like, that's not how that would be. That's not how you run a restaurant in real life. You know what I mean? Depending on the movie or TV show, it's supposed to be fantastical or overly dramatic or overly comedic. But I think for a long time, therapy didn't have that many representations to pull from. And now it feels like there's a ton, like there's a lot more. And it starts to make me wonder, like, in what medium is like therapy being best represented? Or maybe we're going to dissect some films and TV that's like real popular. We'll talk about in each one what's good, what's bad, and what's like not good.
I personally feel that, like, as time has gone on, so less of a medium, but like more recent films and TV shows overall have more accurate representations. I agree with everything that you all have said, that like nothing is going to be 100%, because at the end of the day, it is for entertainment purposes only. But, and I think I brought this up on this podcast before, but you know, A Million Little Things is one of my favorite TV shows. So Maggie in A Million Little Things is a psychologist. She's very ethical. It talks about men's mental health a lot, especially Black men's mental health. And I feel like it does a very good job at portraying depression, suicidality, and like also not just those like, I don't know, big symptoms we think of, because I think movies that I can think of from like the 80s, 90s take some of those stereotypical symptoms and really just like drive those home. So I don't know if there's like a better medium or it's more recent films and TV shows, documentaries do a better job of being more accurate.
That's what I love about TV shows is I feel with TV shows that separates them maybe a little bit different than movies is TV shows happen usually 1 hour episodes, 20 episodes. That's 20 hours that you kind of get to dissect. So for example, like you were talking about A Million Little Things, right? You know, you saw Rome going and making his movie and doing day to day, and but also really, really struggling with that and talking about that in that show. Also, just side note, guys, there's probably going to be spoilers in this entire episode. So sorry about it.
Get a few spoilers.
Sorry about it. But you know, in a movie like, you know, Silver Linings Playbook, you have 2 hours that you're trying to maybe get a point across. And a lot of times you're missing so much nuance and you're not seeing some of those smaller aspects. And again, like you said, Jess, it's entertainment value. Like it is sensationalized a lot of the time to make you keep watching.
Totally. And Silver Linings Playbook for me is an example where so many things I thought were really well done, and then things where you're like, never. Where it's like the representation of bipolar, I really thought was great.
Yeah.
Like I thought Bradley Cooper did a great job. It was very believable to me. It didn't feel overdone. You also get to hear his backstory and more like they would be a real client. Like as a therapist, you're like collecting info about him, the things he cares about, his interests, not just he suffers from mania off and on and, you know, got in trouble with the law. Like that's of course not even, it's just part of his story. It's not the whole story. But the bad in that is when he sees the therapist at the Eagles tailgate and the therapist looks at him and goes, "I'm not your therapist today. I'm a fellow Eagles fan."
K10 has clearly never seen Silver Linings Playbook by her face.
That sounds so wildly unethical.
He literally says, "I'm not your therapist. I'm just an Eagles fan." And they like party and rage and get in a fight. A lot of things happen, but you're like, never ever would a therapist, if you saw a client, would be like, "I'm not your therapist." Like, no, under no scenario would you tell someone, "I'm not your therapist" in this moment. But
oh God.
Yeah. Justin, you bringing that up makes me reflect, like some of the other like films and stuff I like. And I feel like a lot of films that I feel do well at like talking about mental health do a poor job of like the therapist role.
Right.
I mean, we can talk about Good Will Hunting, but another one, I don't know if you all have seen this at all. It's about eating disorders to the bone. It was a Netflix movie that came out years ago. And I thought it did a phenomenal representation of different eating disorders, things like that. It was, on the other hand, like it was very real. So it could have been really triggering. But the therapist was like so unhinged. And granted, they presented it as like, he's not a typical therapist. It's like, you go to him when you've tried every other like intervention. But I was like, this man is wildly unethical. And I mean, I know, Justin, you said Goodman Hunting, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, but I don't know, when you were talking about that kind of thought just came to mind, you know, oh, they do good at mental health, but not so good at the therapy aspect. And I think that's a theme in general. I've found that therapy is still not well represented.
I have a thought about that, but I'd love to get y'all's thoughts before we dive into specifics. But I think therapy is super interesting, but it's not always super exciting. Yeah. And so when you're doing a Hollywood movie and you're maybe showing 90 seconds, I mean, maybe a couple minutes of like therapy, it's going to be so sensationalized where, gosh, in like a 50-minute, 55-minute session, some of y'all run to the hour. Sometimes that's me. But like a lot of it is hearing a story, collecting info, open-ended questions. Like it's not always challenge and some huge insight or snarky comment. But I feel like to keep people's attention, therapy is often the thing that feels not even close to reality.
Yeah.
Well, and
that's a really good point.
Also makes it look like that every session is this profound session, when the reality is like you definitely can have profound moments, but not every session is this huge, profound, life-changing session. That I've definitely found that happening.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree with you, Justin. I think, like you said, like therapy is not exciting when you're looking at it for the full hour.
No.
And so they got to find a way to make it exciting somehow.
Totally.
I guess essentially they're trying to capture like the essence of like the high moments, you know, in film. So that makes sense. And I'm just trying to think, because I'm not like a big movie person, but when I think about the therapists that I know who are represented, or the therapists, you know, that have been represented in movies that I've seen, I think they do a pretty good job of representing, at least like most of the time I've seen therapists that are white, and that's kind of an accurate depiction of the field, even though I wish it wasn't, you know. But and then another thing too is that the one thing that I think they get a little wrong is that it's always like this prim and proper like set, and it's not. Like therapists are just they look like us, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I wonder too if like people watching these movies think that therapists are always kind of like buttoned up, you know. I just wonder about that.
The other thought that just came to mind, because Justin, I didn't think of it that way, but I agree with your point. I also think in times where I've watched, and this is probably more TV show, because KBI, that was a really good point that you made about like hours on end. When like a TV show has a therapist, do you ever notice like every single person in that TV show has the same therapist? Like they're all like, there's only like one therapist in the entire town.
That's it.
Like,
that's it.
And so like, even if the context of the therapy session is not necessarily an inaccurate depiction, like the fact that, you know, characters A and B go to this therapist for couples, and then their kid is also seeing this therapist doing play therapy, and then their brother is also I'm like, unless you live in a really rural town that literally only has one therapist, which we know most movies are not set in rural, especially the ones showing therapists. But that was like another thought I just had. It's like, even if it's not necessarily a wrong depiction of the therapy session, there's usually like dual relationships or something.
Yeah. I think that was how it was in Wednesday, in the new Wednesday movie on Netflix. Is like there was one therapist, and like Wednesday was going, her little boyfriend was going. Like I do think it was like the small town thing, but like still issue. But I do agree, like it always tends to be that one person, the
one white prim and proper therapist that K10 highlighted,
and they're the bad guy, and they turn out to be the bad guy.
Yeah, we don't like that.
Yeah.
No, you know that casting director, executive producers, like, no, we casted therapist. We have therapist is over there. What do you mean? that there would be multiple therapists. We're lucky we put one in.
We got budget for one thing.
We got therapists right there.
Yeah.
But no, like, unless it's like a school, like there's certain settings where I'm like, okay, it may make sense, but I'm with you. Yeah. There's so many shows on TV that I'm thinking of. I'm like, yep, you're right. Everybody sees that one therapist, which in the real world,
so crazy.
We all have different therapists. We all have and that's the fun part. You're like, oh, and we go by the name of our therapist, but you're like, you'll never guess what Jasmine said to me this week. But that's the fun part in the real world, is like sharing the dynamic, which is very unique to your therapist.
Yeah.
So one question I had for you all, we've kind of talked about like, there's good parts, bad parts, therapy. Like, can you all think of any like just really bad examples of mental health for therapy? Other than
what about Bob?
Therapist. What about Bob?
What about Bob?
Oh God.
Such poor boundaries in that movie.
The worst boundaries I've ever seen in my entire life. But I think obviously we all know it was made to be like, but like, it's so bad. But it was such a good movie.
But not a good movie to talk about the therapeutic relationship.
No. Well, and I think that sometimes like thinking about that, like, you know, if the only experience you've ever had with a therapeutic relationship is like what's on TV, what's in the movies, like you're either going in prim and proper, right? That's what you're expecting. Or you're thinking like your therapist is going to sleep with you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Also true.
Why is that a common storyline all the time?
So played out.
Because our ethics are like, don't have sex with clients, and then movies and TV are like, let's do that. It's like,
let's sleep with my therapist.
That's not what we're about, you know?
Brakes. Pump the brakes. Thank you.
Yeah. The one movie that I saw was Split, and I just thought it was terrible. I just thought it was absolutely terrible, but that's just personal opinion. Just in the way that they depict the alters, and for those of you who don't know, Split is about DID, I'm pretty sure. And and I just think too about like everybody who has DID has such different experiences too. So how are you going to capture it all in one movie? I get it. But it just felt so fantastical. And Justin, to your point, I guess movies are supposed to be that way, you know? But I was like cringing as I was watching it. I was like, oh God, I don't know about that.
There's a high risk when it's like you don't have a lot of representation regarding any sort of difficulty or condition. And then you come out with a movie on it and the person's, you know, a serial kidnapper. I'm trying to think killer. I've only seen that movie once. It's been a while.
Me
but
too.
like
Kidnapping,
like it's so, again, it demonizes the condition. And
Absolutely.
Again, we can know it's a movie, but there's a huge risk and cost to the mental health community when it's like, we're not at that point when you can sort of like make movies about all kinds of things. I still feel like it's like a sensitive part. If you're going to highlight a mental health condition and that person's like, for lack of a better word, like awful because they're like kidnapping people, killing or whatever, that's a high cost. Like that's going to increase stigma across the board.
Totally.
I think another show that did that as well is anybody watch 13 Reasons Why?
I know.
So when I read the book and when that came out as a show, I was like, like this has potential to do really, really well.
Yeah.
And I was so let down because yes, there were things about it absolutely that, you know, didn't really like, but I thought that it could really start a conversation around suicide and depression and bullying and homophobia and like all of this stuff. And it was so sensationalized that it took away the entire, I felt it took away from the message that it could have had for our teens. Because I watched it and I would, like, as a grown adult, I watched it and I was uncomfortable as someone, you know, who works in the field. And I remember, because I watched it immediately when it came out, because at the time I was working with teens and I was like, my teens are going to watch this. And I remember I literally binge watched it in a night that I could be prepped for my teens. And I had teens come in and we were actually like crisis processing this show because of it. And like, I had clients who were like, I'm going to go see this. And I said, hey, I want to talk about this with you for a minute before you go and watch this. I want to give you some trigger warnings because it's pretty intense. And like I said, like I just felt like it wasn't intense in like a good way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I watched 13 Reasons Why when it came out as well. And nerd alert here. So, because I saw that we got some like in our jumping ahead to the polls, like people wrote 13 Reasons Why and stuff, and we got a question about it. So back in 2017, I actually wrote a blog post about it because like of just how I felt about it. And so I pulled it up because I haven't deleted this blog, even though I haven't used it in years. And I talked about like some of the things they did well, like even just like talking about, you know, the difference between high school partying and having a substance use issue, self-injury, things like that. But like, I agree with you, KBI. There was so much like, I mean, trigger warning, like the rape scene and things like that were just so graphic. And
it was too much, in my opinion, you know?
And then how the school counselor did not do his job. Like that was probably the most frustrating thing for me. Like it was just so dismissive. And like to your point, KBI, like a lot of teenagers were watching this. And I remember not only was it like triggering for me as a mental health professional and things like that, like thinking about my teen clients and the vulnerability of just being that age, and then watching this and seeing like a school counselor dismissing the concerns or just like everything that they went through. Like I think there were some things that were done well, but overall I had a lot of issues with it.
Agree with everything y'all said. Yeah, it's what this school counselor thing. I was like, no.
No, it makes me, changing gears a little bit, it makes me think of reality TV shows, Hoarders, My Strange Addiction, Intervention, the classic. And it's like, the thing that I really appreciated when those were kind of coming out is they were real people. Yeah. And I can distinctly remember watching episodes where I'm like, that actually looked like, again, these people know what they're getting into. Maybe Intervention's a little tricky. I don't know how much they know or don't know. Yeah. But some of the methods that they use, the gradient exposure therapy, I'm like, that actually that looked like you're kind, because it's supposed to be real. But then other episodes I'd watch, I'm like, yo, that looked rushed as hell. I'm like, in the real world, they just flooded that person. And again, in the Intervention show where the families, you know, come to terms of like, we need to stop enabling this person. It can be, maybe we'll have this debate now. Was that ever ethical? Is that dumb to do? Does that have a place where it could work? But I enjoyed that it was at least showing some sort of therapeutic thing in real life. But overall, my sense is a lot of that felt rushed and forced because they're trying to, again, show the highlights and not sort of the nuance and kind of methodical pacing that a lot of therapy and interventions actually have.
I was thinking like you just lose the element of time. And it takes not so much time for people to like work through. I'm thinking of Hoarders, right? Like to work through all of the nuance of like, you know, do I keep this item? Do I let it go? Like I get that part, but that could take days, weeks, or even months for people to like really process, you know, and it's not captured, but I get it. You know, you have to cram it into a season or whatever, you know, or an episode.
I love that you brought up reality TV because, and you all can disagree with me, but one of the things that makes me so uncomfortable, and not shows like Intervention or Hoarders where like the purpose is to like show these interventions, but like if you're watching a reality TV show, and I don't watch a ton of reality TV, but one that comes to mind is Teen Mom, because that was one that I would watch, and people give permission for cameras to be in their live therapy sessions. And it always makes me very uncomfortable. And I know like, okay, there's a consent process and things like that. But whenever I watch reality TV and there is a scene of people in their therapy session, first, I'm like, I would never in a million years consent to be filmed on TV. Like as a psychologist, like I would never
in an actual therapy set. Like,
yeah. So like the one I'm thinking of, like Caitlin and Tyler for Teen Mom, would film their therapy sessions. Like, and the therapist, like, and there's a consent process. But then I always think of too, like, just that power differential between therapists and client. Like, that's just innate. And, you know, okay, this is consenting to be on film, but can they revoke that consent? Can the therapist revoke that consent at late? Like, all of that. And I mean, after we had Nick on talking about all the stuff that reality TV gets away with, I imagine not. But like, anytime I see reality TV and there's a scene with a real therapist, it makes me so uncomfortable. I don't know if anybody else has seen that, has strong reactions to it. It's my own issues I need to work through, but
no, because I think you're highlighting something really good, because I think with therapy, it's not that it's supposed to be like this intimate thing. It's really supposed to be this vulnerable thing. And I think when you're kind of putting that on a screen, you're getting a snippet of what somebody might be going through in a therapy session. And like you guys talked about before, of like, it could be a highlight reel. It could be like a high moment. It could also be probably like, I would imagine being like, some of these therapy sessions could be really difficult for people. And then you're on film. How are you supposed to process that, like a camera in your face while you're trying to process trauma? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. And I just think, I wonder, how am I supposed to word this? Like, I wonder about how therapeutic it actually is. I know it's for film, but if you're doing therapy and you're putting, like, how therapeutic actually is it really, you know, at the end of the day?
And that's how I felt. I didn't watch it specifically because it made me uncomfortable with the Jonah Hill documentary.
I didn't watch that.
I didn't watch it because I just could, like, I was like, this makes me uncomfortable just thinking about it.
Yeah.
I see, and I knew I was going to have to preface the hell out of this, because I'm like, there's no therapist in the world who would approve of the text that got leaked from Jonah Hill to his ex-girlfriend. And so I had watched Stutz, is the name of it. And then those came out, and I'm like, yo, that was like, it was sort of like a punch in the gut. Not that I know a lot about Jonah Hill. I don't. Yeah. But I was like, yo, those texts are they're just brutal. Like, they're controlling. There's some manipulation. It's just like, you see those, you're like, oh, it's like, wow, he has a lot to work on. Setting that aside for just a moment, I thought Stutz was a real example of a real therapist. Like, I watched the whole thing, and there's some things that you're like, oh, I don't agree with this. But it was the first time from start to finish I watched a documentary where I felt like this was some therapist I just knew. Like, he was explaining his theories. He was talking about how he helps Jonah or other clients using his theory. And it was specific. And so, like, I've never seen that in depth done before, ever, in a documentary, movie, film, or whatever. So I thought that was novel and unique. There were some of his theories that I'm like, yo, that's out there. And like, it did branch more into sort of spiritual religious than I do with my clients. But I still felt like at least there is an example out there of like, that's not some bullshit textbook CBT robot shit that sometimes I feel like I see in like Hoarders and other things where it's like, it's so by the book. I'm like, that's not even real life though. Like, you're being by the book because you're being filmed. But for what it's worth, the thing I liked about Stutz is it felt like a real person, like a real therapist that had like nuance and sort of stuff I agreed with and stuff I disagreed with.
And I guess if you think about real life, like, I'm sure all four of us have different therapeutic modalities, and we probably might disagree on an intervention that we might use, or, you know,
100%.
You know what I mean? So that makes sense to me. Like, if there's certain little things, I think I haven't seen it because I just thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be too intimate. You know, it's just going to be kind of wild. But now that you said that, I would love to watch it and just kind of see that. Because I think that, like, to your point, text messages aside, it probably would feel refreshing to watch that, you know?
Definitely unique. And I don't quite have the same reaction. Like, Jess, when you said, you're like, I would never do this. My first question to you was, as a therapist or the client? Because as a client, I would do it. Maybe it's just me. Maybe that does say something about me. But if someone came to me like, Justin, we want to film your therapy sessions, I would do it. Because, and I'm not trying to be some superhero or anything, but like, I just don't think that exists. And would it change the dynamic? 100%. You can't lie and say it wouldn't. But at the same time, how else do we destigmatize something that many people still have no understanding of what the fuck it is?
True.
Like, you can talk about therapy, and we do, to no end, but it's different when you see it. And it's hard because like, I don't know how else you would.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah. Cause I think the thing for me is I just know in film, they cut out some things and they place things in different ways. And just having Nick on, a couple of weeks ago, we were all enlightened by like all these things that could happen. So if it's authentic start to finish, I think that's great, but I think that media has a tendency to kind of, pump things up in a different way. Yeah.
I didn't even want to be filmed and watched it back in front of my classmates. So,
oh my God, do you remember those days?
I'm not going to be filmed and have it watched by millions of people.
Oh, can you imagine?
That's honestly my only qualm. I'm like, I just wouldn't do it because I don't want to watch myself back.
I think I'm comfortable doing it as a therapist, but she wouldn't watch it anyway.
Well, if it's a
she wouldn't even listen to it.
I wouldn't listen to it. If it's a show.
So, oh my God, never mind. I think I'd be comfortable doing it. I think I would wonder about the client's, I would be too concerned about their experience and if they feel comfortable, like all that stuff would just be in my head too much, I think.
And I think that's my fear too. It's like, how is the client feeling in this moment? Like, are they holding back because of the camera? Even if it was like, the client consenting or like they being the one filmed and less about me. But I see your point, Justin, and I hear it.
But I have more concerns if I'm the therapist. I was just saying, I don't have those concerns if I'm the client.
Like the client, you're like, let's roll.
If anyone's listening, if they want to do a little docuseries, I'll be the client and be real.
Yeah, and be real.
But as a therapist, I also have the same concerns. Like the consent would have to be so elaborate, detailed, and it's adding another layer of power that's like tough.
Yeah. But no, it's not tough.
Oh, Jess, let's go.
It's not tough. It's informative.
The Google Scholar Shorts.
Let's go.
So one, like, I guess we haven't really talked about like specific mental health concerns that much other than the ones that, we talked about like Silver Linings Playbook. But the question I want to pose to you all, when you think of portrayals of autism in the media, what do you think of? KBI is making a face.
Yeah, KBI can answer this.
I'm going to leave this one to you because I got big feelings.
I have no accurate representation.
Yeah.
None.
They are all samviants. They're all samviants. Picture memories. Flat affect. That's what they are. The Good Doctor. What's the show on MTV?
I know what one you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about. He's a metal singer. The actor's a metal singer.
What is the name of that one? Oh no, I was thinking of something else.
Oh,
I was thinking of the dating show.
Love on the Spectrum.
That one.
Oh, there's another one on MTV. I literally can't recall it right now. But it's all they're samviants. They have picture memory. They are recluse. They don't like me. Like they're the textbook definition of autism. I got big feelings.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. So this study came out in July of 2023. So this is like the most recent study I've ever reviewed. And it looked at the portrayal of autism in mainstream media with a focus on both nonfiction media, so newspaper, social media, as well as fiction media, so movies, TV, literature, from 1988 up till 2022.
Wow.
So researchers found that the portrayal of autism in the media varies. However, stigmatization is most prominent in newspapers, so use of negative language, focus on negative aspects of autism, and the medical model of disability, as well as high stigma in movies and TV. So once again, focusing on the negative aspects of autism, lack of diversity in what autistic individuals look like. So typically white males, and often only representing high levels of autism or very stereotypical, such as savantism, just like KBI was saying. Literature, on the other hand, often has a more diverse and positive representation. They also looked at video games, and representation of autistic characters has increased over time. And the representation tends to be more positive with a focus on resiliency. And then social media tends to have a more supportive tone. And then the other thing I wanted to highlight is that really at the end of this review, what they talked about was having autistic individuals be included in the creation of these movies, TV shows, video games, etc., to more accurately represent autistic individuals.
No,
Any thoughts?
I love that the data was collected. I love the intent. And I think the skeptic in me feels like there's a certain responsibility when you're producing reality TV, which I know we had a great episode, Nick, or like a movie or TV. It's like, I don't think these people care. Maybe that's
the feeling I get
bad
too.
and cynical. They care about eyeballs, viewership. And let's face it, this is the same with the media. The media gets more sensational because it's more interesting than reality. But that's sad. Like, that should be sad that this is the case. Because when you asked the question, I paused and thought, I'm like, I can't think of a single good representation of autism in TV and movies. And maybe I'll have to think harder, but.
Go ahead, Kibia.
I was about to say the show I was thinking was not on MTV. It was on Netflix, and it was called Atypical.
I haven't seen that one.
Don't waste your time. It's crappy.
Okay.
It's terrible. It's terrible.
Good to know.
Yeah. I don't know. That's really interesting research, because I think, Justin, to your point too, like, I don't know, we have like a global mental health epidemic. And if people aren't being represented in a way that makes them feel seen and heard, like, what are we doing? Like in my opinion, like, it just feels so callous, even when I just think of like being on the spectrum of autism spectrum disorder, or even like DID, or like the ones that aren't as represented, in media. I don't know. It just makes me kind of sad, but also excited because it's represented in some way. Is that kind of, I'm like, let's breadcrumb it. You know what I mean? Like, we'll take anything, it's kind of weird.
And that's where I go back to what I said is like right at the beginning is like, it's like we wanted to be represented and we're happy that there's something. But again, it's so stereotyped that is it causing more harm than it actually is helpful?
Yeah, that's the key.
Yeah, and maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's in the casting and the writing of like some of these people maybe showing some of their ignorance that like, I'm even thinking of like anxiety. It's like anxiety isn't like, I have anxiety, I'm so worried, like all the time. You know what I mean? But I'm like, you think of like the stereotypical like anxious freaking zombie apocalypse survivor, and you're like, you see it and you're like, this is overdone. Like, it's just like, it's so hard to capture normalcy, but it's easier to capture normalcy when you know what it looks like, when you've been around it, when you have it, or like your friend does, or you know what I mean? It's more normal to you. Like you've seen it. But I think in the writing of these, sometimes they don't start from there. They're like, we want an autistic kid represented, someone neurodivergent represented. And it's like, yeah, but where'd you go from there, writer? Like, where did you go from that point?
Right.
I mean, I think over time I have seen, in the last couple of years, more substance use represented more accurately than mental health.
Yeah.
I think because you're getting the backstory. Not to go down that rabbit hole, but I feel like in more shows and TV, they're not just like, I'm some person using heroin on the street. It's like, we've gotten to the nuanced point of like, there's far more to this person's story, and we're getting it, which. Yeah.
I'm even thinking, I watch like Mindbender and weird movies, but like, I'm even thinking of like Requiem for a Dream. Like, it's a really old movie. And I just think about like you see the whole progression. It's partly substance use and stuff like that, but like you just see the progression and you almost have empathy for the characters, in the movie. Whereas I think with mental health, you're just like, okay, they have anxiety and they're like worried. It's like, okay, now what? Okay. Like I watched
Is it A Beautiful Boy? It was on Amazon. I think it was Nick Sheaf from Tweak. If you've ever read that book, I'm pretty sure that's the connection.
Really?
It's his
That's one of my
dad's
favorite
perspective. I'm like 80% sure.
Interesting.
I thought that was a pretty decent representation.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I want to know what our group members think, so let's go to the polls.
Yes.
All right. That was a slick transition. I'm just going to pass for that one. All right. So I asked who was doing the polls this week, and I put a picture of my own sneakers and my own leg and my own outfit, and people still thought it was KBI and Dr. J by 1%. Literally, it was 32% for you guys and 33% for me. So y'all are the stars.
Dr. J got legs for days.
Nobody for Jess.
This is kind of messed up. Okay, I wasn't going to say it, but just you brought it up. So like Santa Claus got 22% and you got 13%.
They're like,
Are your tattoos showing?
Yeah,
that's why.
That's why.
That's why
they don't think it's me.
Oh, because they don't.
But we've never seen Santa's legs, so we don't know if he's a tatted bee or not.
We got to tag Santa J. Claus and see what he thinks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the first question, right? The first question was overall, do you think TV and movies mostly portrays mental health accurately, more positively than it actually is, more negatively than it actually is, or unsure?
Negatively.
80%.
Ooh. 54%. More negative than it actually is. Sorry, I'm just messing with you at this point. Okay. Next one. Do you think TV and movies portray therapy accurately? Yes, no, or unsure?
No.
Gotta be no.
Hard no.
Okay, what percent for no?
94.
93%.
Woo!
5% were unsure and 2% were yes. Like,
they probably watched The Sopranos. That's the only show they probably watch.
Listen.
Yeah.
That's probably the most, if I had to pick a therapist that was probably the most decent out of all of them, The Sopranos therapist is probably the one with the least red flags.
Olivia Benson's therapist is pretty good on SVU.
Olivia Benson in general is like,
yeah.
I love her. Okay. How do you think mental health / therapy in TV / movies is impacting the stigma around mental health? Reduces the stigma, makes it worse, or unsure?
Ooh, I feel like it's close. I feel like it's like 50-50 or like 55-45.
I feel like it makes it worse, but I agree. I think it's close. 48 makes it worse.
I'm shocked. Okay, so 57% said made it worse.
Okay.
And then reduces the stigma and unsure were about 20% each.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, wow. What's your favorite / most accurate depiction of mental health or therapy in TV or movies? We got a lot. The movie Joker, 13 Reasons Why, Lucifer. I don't watch movies, guys, so I don't know what any of this is. Good Will Hunting, SVU.
But both Jokers.
Ted Lasso. Ordinary People, The Patient, Girl Interrupted.
Oh,
yeah,
that's good.
Yeah,
Angelina
Silver Linings
Jolie.
Smoke Show, Silver Linings Playbook. There was a lot of that. Euphoria. Have you guys watched Euphoria?
I've not, but I've seen a lot of clips on the TikTok.
Yeah, Ted Lasso came up a lot. The Perks of Being a Wallflower.
Yes.
I love that.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I forgot.
Classics, right? Okay, now a poor depiction. Oh no.
Oh,
what did they say? Desperate Housewives.
Lord.
Okay. Split. I think we all agree.
Okay.
Hannibal.
Oh,
Yeah.
Hannibal.
Yeah,
Poor.
that's bad.
You're
So
right.
somebody said Hannibal, it's a TV show. It's a pretty bad example of a therapist.
Yeah.
Split. The Santa Claus with Tim Allen.
There's a therapist.
There's a the stepdad. The stepdad is psychiatrist.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah,
Interesting.
So
I don't think we ever see him working, but
the stepdad is played by Judge Reinhold, who was my mom's friend in high school.
Yeah, wow.
Are you serious?
Yeah,
Shit.
we went to high school together.
Oh my God.
Random
Somebody said Fatal Attraction.
We didn't talk about that. Yeah.
We didn't. Yeah. Fatal Attraction. That's the last one. So we could even.
You know what I just thought of?
What?
The new Joker, Harley Quinn. She was a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
Before she was a psychiatrist.
Jeez.
Fun fact.
And I thought of another. I don't know if y'all have seen this. The Departed. That's a
longest movie ever. But
it's very long. It's an awful depiction. Of course, they sleep with their client. Classic. Classic in the worst way.
Classic.
What's the one? Oh shit! I don't know anybody's names. Whatever. I'm just gonna ask you guys through text later. Forget it. I'm thinking of who is in The Departed? Who's the main character? What's his name?
Well, it's Leonardo DiCaprio and oh my gosh! Now I'm having a moment.
What's
Matt
the one
Damon,
with?
Right?
Yeah. What's the one with Leonardo DiCaprio? But he's like on Rikers Island or something.
Oh, Shutter Island.
Shutter Island.
Okay, that one I saw.
Good.
That one's interesting.
I thought you were trying to figure out the Titanic, and I was real confused for a second.
Shutter Island, yo, I haven't thought about that in a while.
Yeah,
that one fucked
That
me up.
ending, oh my lord.
That ending sent me.
Has anybody seen The Secret Window with Johnny Depp?
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
That one too.
Yeah, that's wild too.
Shit, there's so many.
All right.
Those psychological thrillers that have the mental stuff undertone that you don't sometimes like now. I didn't think of that as like a mental health movie. Oh, which then
I sometimes think of movies that I watch that I have like, I feel like I have like a trauma response from. I know that's like not the right way to say it, but like A Clockwork Orange or Requiem for like those movies I feel like so weird about for some reason. And I'm like, was there mental health themes or was it just chaos? I don't know.
You know, the one we didn't talk about, and I'm surprised it just didn't come up before we transition, is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah.
That one. Yeah.
And the terrible representation of like ECT, which was accurate, you know,
then
way back then. But like,
You know, it's a decent representation of group therapy. Decent.
What?
Fight
our
Club.
podcast.
Yo,
decent.
What's the first rule of Fight Club, though?
We don't talk about Fight Club. Breaking confidentiality.
They're big with confidentiality. Don't talk about it. You know, like that's a plus, right?
I was thinking about the meeting scenes, but yes, also their group in the basement.
I'm with you. Yeah.
I don't have a good transition.
I was like, you got nothing, Jess.
I was gonna be like, you know what else is good for group therapy? The question.
The group member questions. Yes. There we go. Thank you. Team effort. Thank you all for submitting your questions as always. And honestly, like some of them were similar, but we got a lot of different ones, and some we've already touched on, but I want to expand. So we're going to just jump right in. So Emily from the US asks, what do you think is the most important aspect that needs to change in TV and films related to mental health? And then she also says, K10, I hope you read this. Thank you for making this pod a safe space for us fellow queers.
Hey.
You're welcome, Emily. I'm always here to represent. Thanks for shouting me out. Yeah.
So what do you all think is the most important aspect that needs to change in TV and films?
You know what? It's funny because in us having this dialogue, I'm having a little bit of sympathy for like directors, producers, writers, because I think I'm just now embracing that it's just hard to depict how monotonous therapy can be. And that's not the best word. Methodical was the word I wanted. And some of it monotonous. That's probably not what I want to say, but methodical therapy can be, because it's, again, you're not having these big moments all the time. There's slow insight, slow change, resistance. Like even resistance doesn't look like it does in movies and TV. It's not someone being like, no, like,
I'm out of here.
Like even resistance depicted in TV and movies is so over the top. And in reality, it's someone being like, no, I don't actually think so. And then 3 sessions later, you're like, you know what? That actually was right. You were right about it. Yeah. But I think I'm just having a moment where I think it's just hard. Part of me thinks of like, maybe if reality TV becomes less corrupt, that maybe there is some sort of avenue to show like reality and have it be close to reality. But in TVs and movies, I'm a little skeptical that at least for therapy, that getting it close to look like reality is gonna like have to be drawn out. I can't imagine it in a movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, I think it's like a little bit of like maybe a hot take, but I just wish that there was more, I don't know, like they talked about the legal disclaimers or like the limits to confidentiality or like if you are having it, like I wish that they had more of those disclaimers because as somebody who struggles with mental health, just like all four of us, I could watch a movie or a TV show and think like, oh, wow, this is kind of triggering or, oh, wow, like this is similar to maybe what I experienced. And I don't notice as much emphasis. I know they put it in like the show notes and stuff like that, but they don't really emphasize like somebody talking to the screen saying, listen, this is a depiction of that. Like, I wish that they did that only because I feel like it would make it not only more legitimate because our job is really hard, but and fun and great, you know, and at the same time, I think it would help people get the resources because think about it, who's watching TV? It's like everybody. And if you're struggling with mental health, that would be the greatest thing to just have those disclaimers on the screen just in case you're struggling, you know? Yeah. So
I think for me, something I would like to see or change is mental health being portrayed in a way that's less stigmatizing. I do think we're getting better at it. And I know we have a question here coming up, so I don't want to get too much into it, but I'm very into like crime shows. And I feel like a lot, especially in that realm, mental health is like weaponized and stigmatized as like the root cause of this horrific crime. So I would like to see like a more, I guess, or less stigmatized approach and maybe more strength based as well.
I'm sure forensic psychologists would agree, you know, just in general.
So Elizabeth from Kentucky asked a similar question, but different. Can y'all please talk about what you wish was shown more in the media around mental health? Appreciate y'all's pod.
I wish the middle ground was shown more. Right? The problem is that the middle ground isn't what's going to get people to watch. No, like people want the sensationalized. Sadly, that's the biggest piece. But you know, we talked about it. But you know, sometimes depression is just I'm just going throughout my day. And I'm just existing. And it's more of an internal monologue. And we don't, like, that's hard to portray in a TV show and movie. I accept that. But I would definitely love to see more of that middle ground shown more often and more representation of talks about suicide.
Yeah, I would love that, actually. I'm really happy you brought that up.
I also think nuance, which isn't big in media, because people want definitive things related to exactly what KBI was just saying. But where I think I've heard the most nuance and specificity is podcasts. I think you just have the time, you have the focus. People are having more in-depth conversations. I don't see that on media, but I do also see it a bit in social media. I think, and I feel this pressure as a modern creator of like short form content's hard. And it's not to be like, woe's me, but like when you have like 60 to 90 seconds to make a point on something, it's tough. So you get a lot more nuance in the caption, but really it's podcasts or you're making that 15-minute YouTube video. But on a lot of short form content, which is dominating social media right now, it's like as professionals, we're trying to adapt to get a point across. And it's almost impossible to include a lot of nuance in that. So I guess I feel hamstringed by that, but I do appreciate it when I listen to podcasts and other forms where I'm like, we're able to break that down in more detail.
I totally agree. Jess and I sometimes go back and forth. We'll send each other screenshots of things like, why is this so strong wording? Like, why can't it say sometimes it depends? Like, you know, just to kind of capture all of the nuance. So I'm with you on the nuance thing, Justin. Yeah.
True.
I mean, reflecting on our conversation earlier about like what I talked about with Google Scholar Shorts, I think more accurate depictions of autism and neurodivergence would be good. Because like now thinking about it, if we think of like just neurodivergence or like ADHD, for example, I don't think off the top of my head I can think of a film or TV show that like has a character that I feel has been identified as having ADHD and like really talks about the struggle. I don't know if you all can think of something, because when I think of like mental health, I think of, depression, anxiety, or those like DID, bipolar, like
big ones.
Bigger ones. But like ADHD, autism, or even like learning disabilities, things like that.
I was even thinking like those things. Yeah. Or even like, I guess I can't even think of like, I'm thinking of like chronic pain and like the depression that might come along with that. Like, I'm just thinking of all these different nuanced things. And it's hard to find it,
So Haley from Germany asks, how do you feel about shows like Criminal Minds that paint certain mental health conditions in such a horrible and purely negative light, assuming you don't think everyone with NPD, DID, schizophrenia, etc., is eventually going to end up doing horrible things to other people?
One of my pet peeves, my biggest icks, is when people depict people with schizophrenia in like a violent way, because it's so rare that
it is.
You know what I mean? It's like just so rare. I've worked inpatient and I've been on the side of doing not guilty by reason of insanity evaluations for people who have like committed crimes and all that. I don't have nearly as much experience as some of our forensic psychologist friends, but I do think like when you're in that world, you're just kind of seeing the symptoms as they are. You're not really categorizing them as good and bad. You're just like looking at them. But I think movies and TV tend to portray people with schizophrenia or like, DID, like as these like violent people, when I've never had that experience with clients, at least. So I can't speak for everybody's experience. I think with NPD, it is hard because there is that feeling of like that external gain and stuff like that. So it really just depends. Or antisocial personality disorder, that's like one that's a little different. But I do wish that in those shows that they highlighted that there's more to it than the mental health thing,
Yeah, my question is, if we stopped 100 people on the streets and asked them, what is schizophrenia? Well, how many out of 100 are going to be close enough that, again, some inter-rater reliability pool of experts would say, yeah, that was right. You're correct. I'm asking because I don't know, but I also have a feeling. I don't think we're anywhere near being sort of enlightened enough on mental health to depict things sort of in wild extremes.
Yeah.
There's part of me that's like, yes, if we were at some tipping point where the majority of people, schizophrenia, having delusions, hallucinations, here's what that might look like or whatever, then it's like most of us could watch a depiction of that and be like, nah, this is obviously an extreme sort of like sensationalized example. And we could debate whether it should exist or shouldn't. But there's just such a high cost when you ask yourself that question of like 100 people on the street, do they even know what schizophrenia really is? To me, it is a high cost to depict anything in extreme. And again, I know we're not there yet as a culture and society. So yes, globally, I don't like it.
And that's me. Like, I will defend schizophrenia till my dying day. From where I came from working previously, like those were some of my favorite clients to work with because it is so misunderstood and the media just so badly takes it in a direction that it does not need to be because of the tiniest percentage. But there's tiniest percentages in every aspect.
Oh, and everything.
That is that. But we focus on the ones that are so misunderstood because we don't have the education about it. So we're going to focus more on that. And that's why I love people like Cody, Schizophrenic Hippie, on social media who really talks a lot about, his journey and his recovery and his maintenance and all of that, because it shows that it's not quite what the world wants us to think it is.
Yeah. The only thing I'll add is I love crime shows. I love crime shows. And with that being said, I think, with everything you all are saying, it just adds to the stigma and the misinformation about these already misunderstood disorders. And then I feel like there's this, blame, and we see this narrative all the time, like in news media and stuff, when something horrific happens. Oh, they must be mentally ill, things like that. And I definitely think crime shows play a role in perpetuating that narrative that to do something horrific, you must be mentally ill.
Yeah,
No, you could just
crazy.
be a horrible person.
Yeah.
Period.
You could just be a dick. You know what I mean?
Big asshole.
Yeah.
Okay. So we kind of already touched on this, but I wanted to give us an opportunity to talk more about it if anybody had any extra thoughts. So Rebecca from Singapore asks, I wonder what you all think about the way therapists are portrayed in movies. So therapists themselves.
I just want them to stop sleeping with their clients.
Yeah, stop fucking everybody. God damn.
You gotta start there.
I just like
Just
that.
get on Tinder. Like, just find somebody else.
you
Like,
can
there's the
fuck
pool of
anybody
people.
else.
Just the world is your oyster.
There is
Put your preferences.
50
Get out
people in the
there.
world that you can't sleep with. Don't sleep with them. The people on your
It's
Facebook.
just,
I mean,
there are plenty of people out there.
True.
I don't know.
I
could go off. Yeah.
I think that is the biggest one, though, for sure. I think we fluctuate from that of like some therapist that's just like falling for their client. Like, how many times have I seen that? And the therapist that's like robotic, buttoned up, which is why, again, for me, Good Will Hunting is like the most ideal in between. Like Robin Williams portrayed that so well. You knew he was sort of a flawed human being who was trying. He was trying to listen, get Will to come out of his shell, blah, blah, blah. You shouldn't choke your clients.
I was about to say, except minus the choking part.
A moment when Will really got under his skin about the boat and he was tugging at, to spoil it a little bit, his wife had passed, the therapist's wife had passed, and the client was mocking a painting that was in his office, not knowing whatever. He knew it was from the wife, but then he like really pushed. It got bad, but the therapist, flipped out and put his hand on his throat. But aside from that, I do think it's like a real depiction. Like, he felt like a real human being, not some buttoned up robot. I'm like, I don't know that therapist. I've never met that. That's not anybody I went to grad school with.
No, that's not anybody I would trust either. Like,
no, not warm, But anyways, I think it's just extremes. Just so removed, like almost so old school psychoanalytic that like they're saying like two words. Like I've seen that before.
The blank slate.
But it's blank slating it up. How many people do that? Those people are still out there, but literally how many?
I mean, I tried it. Shit didn't work for me. So
You tried to be a blank slate?
So yeah, I did. Because early on, I'm like, oh, I have to just like be professional and like whatever. But y'all know how fucking unhinged I am, right? So I'm just like trying to put myself in this fucking box. You know what I mean? And I'm like, okay, I'm cool. I don't have trauma. I don't have tattoos. I don't have daddy issues. Let's go. And it's just like not like that at all.
That's your entire personality.
Can we get that on a t-shirt? I'm cool.
Yo.
I don't have
That's
trauma.
our new
I don't have tattoos, and I don't have daddy issues.
That's
like,
our new merch.
Seriously. And then I started working at the VA, and I like let myself, just show. And the veterans were like trusting me more than like
Right.
not other people, but like just it's just more personable. And there are blank slate therapists out there that maybe it works for them. I don't know. I'm not hating on y'all.
True.
I just can't fucking do it. Yeah, it's just not me.
You're right.
But to go to something that Justin said a little bit ago about kind of having like sympathy, empathy for these producers, like, I don't know about you all, but like I was definitely taught in graduate school, the client shouldn't know anything about you and da. So if that is what we're still being taught in graduate school and like this blank slate message is out there, why wouldn't a producer either go to the extremes. Okay, we either need to make this person a blank slate robotic or clearly so unhinged that people will know this is not like how therapists are supposed to be.
That's true.
Because I do feel like there's not just like, you know, the 30-year-old millennial therapist coming in with tattoos and casual clothing, but is doing really good work. It's like the 50-year-old white man in button up or the
with a sweater vest
therapist seducing her client in a mini skirt.
Oh God, I can't. There's so many more people to fuck out there. Don't fuck your clients. Like I just can't. Like just stop. Get on Tinder. God, like I can't anywhere.
And swipe
Bumble.
if your client comes up. So I don't know which way you swipe because I'm not.
I don't know that person.
Skip
Bye.
It Absolutely,
no idea who they are. Yeah.
It's to the left for those of us that know. We know it's to the left. Don't you dare swipe up. That's the wrong direction.
Well, on that note, so Alex from Florida,
let's go,
asked, in your opinion, does reality TV accurately portray mental illness? Do you feel they hype up the negative aspects of mental illness, or do they show all sides of mental illness? I love this question because it was about reality TV.
It's so good.
KBI, what is your face right now?
She's just over it. She's like, no,
nothing is accurate.
We'll revisit our episode with Nick when we splice and hide and cut and bull. No. We don't have a filter today for my face today. It's just gone out the window.
Yeah, I think if y'all follow the pod, go to the episode with Nick Thompson. I'm just going to butcher his words. He says it so beautifully, and he is so descriptive with how he talks about it too. And like after talking with him, I think I have such a different view of reality TV now because you don't really have like ongoing consent with certain things that you disclose, right? I mean, you sign a consent form that says like, hey, I'm here to just like be here. Or I don't know. I could be, I'm not an expert here. But then I would imagine like, just say one day you're saying, oh, I'm depressed. And then the next day, just say you're fine, but you're showing like, oh, you're just kind of on the couch. They might use those two clips together and it's not really real, even though it's reality. So I just wish that it was just, there's a camera and there's no cuts and it's just like, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Like that would be ideal, but that's not going to get people watching,
Maybe could I just rewatch this? But it's so funny because it's not even in mental health. But Last Chance U, basketball. The real ones know. Some of y'all are like, yeah. The original season is such a good depiction of people talking about grief and trauma. And again, you're going to be like, in the middle of a sports documentary, yes. The backstories, the way they tell them, and again, who knows? There's always a chance that someone who is filmed on that show doesn't, whatever. But from an observer watching and as a therapist watching, I'm like, yo, you let them tell their actual backstory about losing their mom, about struggling in poverty, being a black man. Like you're getting all this depiction. And then of course it relates to how they're trying to make it in sports to get a college degree. Fascinating, felt like real life, felt like it's talking about racism, class, culture. And it's not a mental health doc, but it is. But I think those are the sneaky ways that I've seen like good representations. Yeah. And it's not in Love is Blind.
True.
Like sort of a stereotypical like reality TV show.
Yeah. Love it.
So the next question, three people asked similar questions. So Anonymous from Canada and Anonymous from the Midwest both ask if TV shows consult clinical social workers, psychologists for TV shows. And then Isabella from Canada with an exclamation point asked, do producers and writers think of possible triggers before producing episodes or movies? And if so, who do they consult? Does anybody know?
So I worked really briefly on, I don't want to out the company or the producers or anything like that. It was a wonderful experience, but we were filming something that was going to potentially go on Netflix 2 years ago. And I was one of the psychologists that was just there as like an expert, like, this is what CBT is, this is what trauma is, like stuff like that. And I just noticed like part of me was like getting pulled, because as a psychologist, like you're an expert in psychology, but then we could also do therapy, right? So I'm like, okay, my therapist brain is on too. There were so many times that I wanted to be like, are you okay? Like, are you good? You know what I mean? Because a lot of these people were talking about their traumas and like just talking about their life experiences. And I just so desperately wanted to be like, afterwards, are you good? Do you want to debrief? Talk to me. And there was none of that, you know? So I'm just like, I hope that's not the reality. That was only my own personal experience for a very brief time, but I want to know your guys' thoughts too.
I do know people in our profession who have been consulted on those things.
Yeah.
I have no idea on how often that's happening. And I'm very skeptical. And even when they've consulted, I'm very skeptical to what degree they followed. What
is actually,
And
I would assume on the shows where it is a poignant point, like it is a common thing that is in there. Like, you know, I know on doctor shows, they frequently will have doctors on there. Yeah. If it's a common like thread in that, then I would assume that they would have someone. But like, yeah, like you said, listen, how often and if they actually follow through on what is said, like that's a whole other ballgame. They're definitely not following through when they sleep with their clients.
Ain't no way.
How many times on this podcast episode?
Multiple, because it's the worst. It is the number one red flag.
It's just so ironic because our ethics code, that's like the first thing they like drill in us. Like, don't sleep with your anybody. Like, it's just like, noted. Why are you even bringing this up? Like, stop. And now it's all in movies. It's like, okay. Like,
Yeah, I agree with everything said. As for Isabella's question about like, do producers or writers think of possible triggers before producing episodes or movies? I don't know, because like even 13 Reasons Why, going back to that, and KBI, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure there wasn't any trigger warnings until after there was outcry. Yep. And then they went back and edited it in. And I've seen that before. Like, they'll produce things, and we could get into a whole conversation about trigger warnings. Are they helpful? Not, things like that. But like, my gut says it's usually an afterthought when there's backlash from people.
I've definitely seen some shows where there have been. So A Million Little Things.
Yes.
Had really good trigger warning in their episodes. I thought that was refreshing. Like, it wasn't like an afterthought. And then they would do post trigger talks.
Yep.
So like, on some of the ones that were high on suicide or things like that, they would like the actors would come on as themselves and say, if you or someone you know is struggling, blah, 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 here are the numbers. I think there was one on domestic violence once. And so there definitely are sometimes, and I think it's becoming more common that they're talking about those things, and showing those, but it's not where it needs to be.
So Alex from Florida, got a lot of Florida people. All of Justin's neighbors are writing in.
Hopefully everyone's okay after the hurricane.
What needs to be done so that Hollywood starts to more accurately display mental illness or struggles rather than portray stereotypes?
Hire actors that actually are dealing with the illnesses themselves.
Ooh, I love that.
That's actually a good one.
It's a good suggestion.
That's a good one. Nothing talks like money. I think if as a tipping point as a society we demanded more accurate representations, I think when something came out that we all agreed was trash, you wouldn't have this push and pull of people being like, I liked Split. And you're like, yo, you like it because you don't know anything about DID.
Yeah.
Or you just don't care. But I think if again, we were all more informed, which is a privilege. I'm not like talking around that. We got to have it in schools and continue the conversation. But if we're all more informed, when you saw something that you're like, yo, that's a terrible depiction, then it would get dinged versus people being like, well, I think it was fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know if this is true or not, or if there is anything like this out there for movies and TV, but I wish that there was kind of like, how do I describe it? Like for mental health startup companies, they have like consultants, like people, clinical consultants, like people who help them like figure out, oh, how do we talk about this mental health thing? You know what I mean? I wonder if there would be that for movies or TV to like, if you are going to depict somebody with DID, if there's a way to like tap in and like Kristen's saying, have people who are experiencing it and maybe therapists and experts to kind of collectively talk about, hey, if you do this part in the film, this might be more damaging. Like, I don't know. But then again, it's like,
yeah.
Who knows? Who knows? I don't know how film works. So,
yeah.
I was just going to say, I think it's also up to the actors, the actresses, the staff on set that when something comes up and it feels uncomfortable, to speak up and to say, hey, I've noticed this. Is there a different way that we could do this? Because this is feeling kind of icky.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I was going to say, Justin, when you were talking, and you know, this is more on us as mental health professionals, but to the point you made of like knowledge is a privilege and not everybody has this knowledge. A thought that came to mind, and you know, this would take years and years to grow, but like, especially like big films. So I'm thinking Barbie movie just came out, or I guess it came out a little bit ago, but like having mental health professionals, say that was about, you know, a mental health condition, talk about on like social media, on YouTube channels, like what was accurate, what was inaccurate, and start conversations about it. I think that would be helpful in addition to like just the general education, or like split. Like I'm sure we could all, if we wanted to, sit down and like basically do a commentary on like why these things are accurate and stigmatizing, and having those conversations so people could actually see, you know, hey, this is why it was inaccurate and this is how it's harmful. But like I said, that would take a very long time, but on a smaller scale. But not that Hollywood's going to listen to us. I'm thinking of things from all angles.
Love it.
So Emily from Texas asks, what do you think is generally portrayed more accurately? Mental health or neurodivergence? Is neither an option?
Neither. I mean, definitely mental health is portrayed more accurately than neurodivergence.
I would agree, given that
if I had
when we had the talk about autism, we thought of all those stereotypes, and then we couldn't think of any other depictions of neurodivergence.
No.
So it's just not talked about, right?
Yeah. And I see neurodivergence kind of like as a spectrum and an umbrella. Like there's so many things in there, you know? So it's just like, how do you capture all of that without going extreme on one end or the other?
Yeah.
So Cindy from Brooklyn and then Lauren from Pennsylvania asked similar questions, so I wanted to group them together. So Cindy says, what I would love is for you guys to send suggestions of TV shows and movies that can be helpful for my future career in social work. And then Lauren asked, do you ever recommend movies or TV shows to clients to help them relate to their diagnosis? If so, what are your favorites?
Ooh.
I couldn't say to relate to a diagnosis, but I always make my clients watch Inside Out. When I was running a DBT skills group for adults, made them watch Inside Out. I just felt like it was, I mean, obviously there are still some issues, you know, within there, but I felt like it just like, you know, depicts feelings in a way that, you know, personifies them. Even I watched a clip and I didn't even realize it. Like I didn't even realize it until I watched this clip where someone broke down the scene where Bing Bong loses his little cart thing, goes over the hill, and he's sad, and Joy's like, how about we fix this? How about we do good things? How about you feel better? Blah, blah, blah. And Sadness just walks over and is like, that really sucks. And like, I just like, and they were talking about like parents, take note.
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't be joy, be sadness. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and so, that's one of my favorite.
I love that. I think for me, it's like, again, I'm not really big with movies, so I kind of suck this whole thing. But I always ask my clients, like, what speaks to you the most? Is it movies? Is it music? Is it art? Like, what is it? And then we kind of try to figure out what would be an accurate depiction for you in a moment that you're having. Is it a book excerpt? Is it an art piece? Like, what is it? And then I have the client explain to me. So I kind of like let them choose, but I don't think it's a bad idea to, if you have an idea of a movie or something like that, especially like with Inside Out, I think that's incredible to suggest that to your client. I have a lot of clients too who are really into like mindfulness and stuff like that. So we do talk about, I guess, books more than movies, but I would imagine that there's movies out there that would help clients too.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this is still waiting to be produced. Like, maybe I'm sort of projecting my own dream projects out there if I ever come into a few millions of dollars. But I think this is out there for somebody to make like accurate depiction of like therapy, of mental health. Like I don't even think we're close yet. Like, I think it's a lot harder to think of any movie or TV that comes close, especially in following people with mental health struggles throughout their day-to-day life. I think those documentaries are yet to be produced, and they're coming. Somebody's going to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't really have any like recommended movies or TV shows. Honestly, my clients probably recommend more movies and TV shows to me to watch than I do.
Disappoint my clients so much
for them. Just because they're like, oh, I watched this, I relate to it, or you should watch this. And for Cynthia's question of like TV shows and movies that could be helpful for my future career in social work, I feel like we've talked extensively about how there's not really good representation of therapy. I mean, I would say a million little things is, and it's one of my favorite TV shows. I feel like that overall does the best at depicting mental health and therapy. Yeah. But that comes with its own issues too.
Mm-hmm. I think this conversation is making me and made me realize the huge Grand Canyon sized chasm between like books and even podcasts I'd put on one side with books, and way on the other side, like movies and TV. Because I'm far more apt to be like, oh, listen to this podcast. Listen to this one. Listen to that one.
Same.
Because it's real life. Yeah. It's real experts. It's not sensationalized. It's not, sort of like made to capture something. It's talking about real things. Mm-hmm. And of course, workbooks are designed that way, audiobooks. Mm-hmm. But it's just making me realize how big that gap is between those two.
Well, even just our episode last week on suicide, like there was no sensationalism there. It was pure fact and just transparent conversation. And we made it a point not to sensationalize a lot of it because we know the realities of it. No, but I do agree.
Yeah. Maybe I have too much faith that maybe one of these reality shows will become more ethical, like a Hoarders adjacent show, which will somehow just be, because when watching some episodes, some still resonate with me. I can remember the client. I can remember the backstory. I can see the intervention. I can see them sort of improving and struggling. But those are the only times I've ever stared at that glowing television and been like, yeah. You know what I mean? Like, there aren't many others.
I even think about the concept of like people who are on TikTok, like TikTok Live for like extended periods of time. You get to see so much about that person's life. Can you imagine a reality show or just a hoarder, like you said, Justin, a Hoarders adjacent that just had lives, like literally like tune in on this and then you could actually see it in real time. And then there's obvious supports there. Just say there's a therapist or something like that. Like, I think that would be so incredible. If the person consents to it, of course, and there's provisions in place, but I think that would be way better.
And then my brain goes to, man, the parasocial relationships that would get formed there.
True. Yeah. Actually, yeah, true.
So go listen to our episode on that to not have a parasocial relationship.
We're just relating back to all the old episodes.
There's a lot there. We're almost at a year. So.
Oh my gosh, I know.
Y'all, it feels good to be back together again.
I missed you guys.
The fam was back.
Yeah.
Together, guys.
Just like anybody, we all have stuff that we deal with. And sometimes we just can't make it, and that's okay.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. Yeah, it is. We try our best. We all listen to this podcast, though. All three of us. Three of us listen to it, whether we're here or not.
4 of us.
3.5 of us.
I do, but here, guys, I do.
You read it.
Listen to it. When I edit the, God, I don't think you guys realize when I edit these clips, I listen to you guys over and over and over and over again.
She's sick of us, actually. So she's like, if I have to listen to this episode one goddamn more time,
to K10 one more time,
I'm gonna just lose it. Yeah, like
I'm gonna quit the podcast.
I was going to bring up having a pumpkin muffin, but I don't want to get ridiculed enough. Donuts rule.
Oh my goodness.
You know what else rules? You all. We appreciate you all being here. We always leave you with a little bit of reflection question, something to think about. We're going to expand upon the great question that was asked in the polls because I want to know from you all. Y'all are probably going to be better than we did of give me a good example of mental health therapy, because we said what we knew. Give me a good example of mental health or therapy being represented in TV, movies, documentaries, reality TV, whatever. Because we want a bit of a list. So if you got a few, put a few down. Maybe we'll watch them. I know now I got a few in my head I want to watch. But it'd be awesome to know. There's just so much out there. We live in this era of so much TV content. There's so much stuff that's been recommended I haven't seen, but this would be great to compile. You're all amazing for being here. Appreciate you being group members, being a part of this. We are approaching 1 year. We got big plans. We got big plans for our 1 year coming up. But thank you as always. Rate, review, subscribe. See y'all next week.
Bye. Love you. Bye.
Peace.